I think one reason that I was pushing for community currencies was basically to help people understand what is money, how is it created, and how can we get it to serve life rather than rob us. And community currencies, if people can see how money is created and have some influence over it, there's more chance of participation in democracy. Right now, the way money is created, most people don't understand it. It's created out of thin air by banks. The banks loan it to the governments at interest. And it's impossible for the government to pay it back. So the government is always in debt. This allows those who create the money to have an incredible amount of power over our government. And what we've witnessed in the last several decades is the criminalization of the financial system and politicians serving that financial sector, and they have been committing, I would say, the largest financial heist in history with that power to create money in almost unlimited amounts and backed by government guarantees so that if they make a mistake, they get bailed out. And obviously, people don't get bailed out, and people have been tricked into taking out loans, buying houses under fraudulent circumstances. There's been massive control fraud. We saw the same thing in the savings and loan debacle in the 80s, except there was some attempt to hold some people accountable and to get some of that money back in the 80s by especially Bill Black. He was one of the regulators who was actually trying to improve the situation and catch the crooks and get the money back. But that hasn't happened in the recent financial meltdown. Instead, the government has worked hand in glove with the financial entities and has facilitated them. They haven't overseen them at all, and there's been nobody who has been held accountable. I think one of the things that we could do, not just to solve our crisis in this country, but also to set an example for the world, is to take that power to create money out of the hands of the private banks and turn it into an actual public utility. We have a distribution and allocation problem in this country. We have plenty of wealth. We have plenty of money. It's just, right now it's concentrated in the hands of less than 1% of the people, and it to the detriment of the other 99% of the people. And we should be able to fund all of our educational needs, all of our healthcare needs, and to repair the infrastructure which is damaged. We even have enough money for I would say, a basic income for people, a citizen's dividend, if you will. If you just think about the bailouts, the billions, the trillions of dollars that were just handed over to the bank, if that money had simply been divided and handed to every single person in the United States, we wouldn't have had the recession, the depression that we've witnessed. I mean, there would have been a flow of currency. We wouldn't have had that problem. But because it went to just those people who actually were the architects and engineers of the problem, who have, the larger banks have bought up the other banks. And of course, there's the insurance companies too. The insurance companies are extremely powerful, and they have benefited to a great degree with the financial crisis. So I think there was some monetary reform legislation that was introduced last September by Dennis Kucinich. It was H.R. 2990. It was called the NEED Act, the National Emergency Empower. Now I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it would take the power to create money out of the hands of the private banks, and it would also not allow banks to create money out of thin air as they've done so in the past. And money, the Fed would basically be nationalized, and the money would be spent into existence. You'd create a monetary authority to make sure that there wasn't tremendous inflation or deflation to control the value of the currency. But it would be non-inflationary if it was actually spent into existence for productive purposes. One reason that we've seen the destruction of our economy is so much of the money and the budget has gone to the military and has been used on war. And this is so destructive of our economy. If you budget, say, $1 billion for bombs versus $1 billion towards education, you have a completely different dynamic. $1 billion on education, you pay for teachers, it goes into the community. $1 billion on bombs, it goes to some corporations. It causes all sorts of havoc wherever the bombs are dropped, but it doesn't employ that many people. It doesn't really. What I would like to see is us to move away from a war economy towards a peace economy. Now, it is possible to also create money at a community level and at a regional level and at a state level. You can do it as individuals. Money is basically an agreement. Anyone who wants to participate, there's a lot of barter networks. Bitcoin, that's a little more complicated. I think a lot of people would have to study it very deeply to begin to grasp and understand how it works. There's a ton of experimentation going on right now because we are in a financial crisis. And it's, for the first time, people are wondering, what is money? It's certainly hurting me, and I want to protect myself. So there's a great interest now in understanding the monetary system and trying to figure out how do we get around the problem of just the lack of a medium of exchange. Back in the 1930s, we saw a number of monetary experiments at the local level. There was a town in Austria called Wörgl where the mayor created money to help overcome the problems with unemployment, and the town issued its own money, and it had some special features, which I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but it was like a negative interest rate, and it encouraged people to spend money very quickly and pay their taxes even in advance. And it turned around the city of Wörgl, Austria. 200 mayors thought it was just such a great model that they decided to adopt it in Austria until the Austrian national government made it illegal. In the United States, Canada, and in Mexico, there were hundreds of places that tried to create local currencies, and with some effect. Some experiments were more successful than others. Actually, the top economist of the day, Irving Fisher, wrote an entire book about it called Stamp Script, explaining it in detail because some of those details really make a huge amount of difference on whether this is going to work or not work. And he also pushed FDR to support those experiments. But FDR decided to move forward with the New Deal, which also enabled the federal government to spend a lot of money into existence on public works projects, which also helped ameliorate the situation during the time of the Great Depression. But I think it was really the war that pulled the American economy forward back in the 40s. However, many people don't know that in the 1930s, there was also monetary reform legislation passed in Canada that worked very, very well, where the Canadian government was able to create its money and to use it for public services, and it did very well until the 1970s. at which time there was some corruption of the politicians, and the politicians started borrowing money from the banks. And Canada sort of went a similar path to the United States. From the 70s, we have seen a concerted effort by corporations to basically take over the country and to channel the wealth into fewer and fewer hands. And we've seen where the corporate profits go up, what has happened is the profits have gone to top management and wages have stayed stagnant or have gone lower, and people have had to borrow in order to make ends meet. And so you've seen this great impoverishment of the middle class, the destruction of the middle class, and it has accelerated even more fantastically in the 2000s, especially when Bush was encouraging people to go shopping in the wake of 9/11, and they allowed and facilitated the whole housing bubble by making it, by laxing regulation, also the dismantling of the Glass-Steagall Act. There was a number of different factors which really allowed the speculators to take over the financial system and suck people into it and suck much of the money into speculation. I think it's very well explained in Inside Job, that criminalization of the financial industry. And if you look at how the financial sector has grown and the productive economy has shrunk and jobs have been exported, there's so much that we could do in this country to reverse that, and Congress isn't doing it. So that's one reason that I am interested in going in there. I think we need monetary reform. We have to rein in corporate power. We have to reduce our military budget. We can't pursue wars of aggression against countries throughout the world. We can't continue with this preemptive war doctrine. And I must say, too, that one of the big problems that I have seen, and one reason I've gotten very, very involved politically, especially since 2001, is the construction of the global police state and the surveillance state. And this has attacked our rights on a very basic level. I find it extremely threatening. And for the government to become increasingly secretive while they know more and more about us and we know less and less about government. We need transparency, honesty, accountability in government. We haven't seen that. Whereas what we have seen is more and more laws criminalizing dissent and threatening our rights. Even the simplest things, our basic freedom of assembly, our freedom of speech. Right now, they have made it just almost completely illegal for us to exercise free speech and freedom of assembly. So this is one of the things that why I want to run for Congress, to speak on behalf of the 99% of the people who recognize that there's something very seriously wrong and that government shouldn't be a threat to us, it should serve us.